Good evening, I'm Farhana Sheikh and you're watching AWANI International. For today's show, we'll unpack China's trade data for April. That's coming up. Right, this is the newly released China's trade statistics for April. China's exports showed unexpected strength in April, growing by 8.1% year-on-year to $315.69 billion. Now, this beats the market expectation of just a 1.9% increase and is followed by the 12.4% rise in March when exporters rushed shipments before the US imposed 145% tariffs on Chinese goods. Now, imports, meanwhile, dipped by 0.2% year-on-year, a far smaller decline than the 5.9% drop forecasted, and better than March's contraction of 4.3%. Now, let's break down some of the China's exports to some of its major trading partners. Now, trade data shows a rise in shipments to Southeast Asia and Europe, offsetting the drop to America. Now, if we look at the America exports here, it plunged by 21%, a sharp reversal from a 9.09% increase in March, while imports dropped nearly 14%. Now, the ASEAN region, China's largest trading partner by block and a key transshipment hub, exports surged 20.8%. Now, if you compare that to the United States, quite the opposite, accelerating from an 11.6% rise in March, while imports from the bloc increased 2.5%. Meanwhile, China's exports to the EU rose 8.3%, while imports fell 16.5% year-on-year. Now, China's trade surplus for April stood at $96.18 billion, lower than March $102.64 billion here, but significantly higher than the $72.35 billion recorded a year ago. Now, this figure suggests that the US-China trade war, marked by steep tariffs, has so far had a limited impact on China's overall export volume. But the smaller trade surplus hints at growing pressure on exporters, who may be absorbing tariff costs or selling at discounts to maintain sales. Now, on the import front, the milder than expected slowdown points to some resilience in Chinese domestic demand, even as Beijing maintained a 125% tariff on US imports in retaliation for Washington's 145% levy. With Beijing targeting around 5% GDP growth this year, the government has been rolling out measures to support consumption and aid exporters. And this weekend, Chinese and US officials are set to meet in Switzerland, aiming to ease trade tensions, with President Donald Trump actually just recently teasing that lowering Chinese tariff to 80% seems right. There you have it, China's April trade data. We'll unpack these numbers more after this break.
Wow, excited ya!
Bermulanya di sini.
Kita nakkan quality wise yang layak terpilih.
Lagi banyak driver, lagi clarity tu lebih lah.
Borhan, mungkin macam Borhan dan Borhan.
Ikuti kisah perjalanan mereka ke pentas Big Stage Alpha di Astro Ria dan Astro Go.
Daulat tuanku.
Now we're here to unpack China's trade statistics for April. We have Shan Said, Global Chief Economist at AWANI. Now, Shan, despite US tariffs on Chinese goods, China's exports grew by 8.1% in April, far exceeding expectations. So what factors do you think helped Chinese exporters maintain this resilience, and can it actually be sustained in the long term? Shan?
I think Chinese have shown remarkable resilience in diversifying very quickly, and they are moving most of their trade and commerce to Southeast Asia, Europe, Africa, and GCC. And if you look at these combined regions, ASEAN, GCC, Africa, so they combine together around 2.5 billion population along with Europe. So that contributes significantly to the overall export outlook. And that clearly demonstrates the Chinese are pretty smart, and they have already planned how to move away from these tariffs, and they have navigated it quite significantly. Moving forward, I think it is sustainable because China has close relationship with ASEAN. They have close relationship with Africa, GCC, and Europe. And in all these countries, they have a few things in common. They have rising economies. They have macroeconomic stability. They have growing infrastructure. And above all, they have the desire to have strong relationship with China in the long run. So I think all these economies, the regions, they want to continue their trade relationship in the long run.
Right. Looking at this region, Shan, while China's exports to the US dropped by 21%, export to ASEAN actually surged by 20.8%. Does this actually signal a clear shift in China's trade strategy towards this region? And within ASEAN, you feel, which countries do you see becoming even more important for China's growth and why?
Absolutely. The largest increase in outbound shipment went to Indonesia, Thailand, and Vietnam. And if you look at these regions, I was in Indonesia last week, and I can tell you what's happening in Indonesia. Indonesia right now is booming. So Indonesia, 278 million, Vietnam, 100 million population, Thailand, 72 million population. So China wants to deal with those countries where demographics are big, where they have leadership, where the young population is strong, and above all, they have the infrastructure and macroeconomic stability. So China is quite bullish, and the recent visit of President Xi Jinping to Malaysia, to Vietnam, and Cambodia is a clear signal that Chinese have clearly pivoted towards ASEAN,
Right.
which is the growth region with 620 million population, GDP size touching almost $4 trillion by the end of this year. So China has made it very clear that they want to move into this region where income levels are rising. The leadership of various governments are committed to having long-term relationship. And above all, the macroeconomic stability is one of the key factors that make China to come to this part of the world.
Right. Shan, your input on Malaysia. What role do you think Malaysia can play in helping position ASEAN as a major global economic force? And how can we make sure this leads to long-term resilience and prosperity for the region?
I think the recent visit of Chinese president to Malaysia has given a lot of leverage to Malaysia. And it has clearly given Malaysia a clear advantage in the ASEAN region, that Malaysia is playing a key role in bringing all the ASEAN countries together, leading from the front. And this gives limelight. In the last 2-3 months, you have seen all the global newspapers, local newspapers, they're all talking about Malaysia. Global companies are moving into Malaysia. FDI is coming into Malaysia. So obviously, Malaysia has got a clear advantage in all this situation. And it helps the population at the macro level.
Right. Thank you so much, Shan. That was Shan Said from UAIQI. Right. On to the next story. Top executives at American AI giants urge Washington to boost infrastructure and champion AI chip exports to stay ahead of Beijing. They said this at a U.S. Senate hearing on Thursday.
Investment in infrastructure is critical. I believe the next decade will be about abundant intelligence and abundant energy, making sure that that America leads in both of those, that we are able to usher in these dual revolutions that will change the world we live in, I think in incredibly positive ways, is critical.
AI is truly the most transformative technology of our time. The United States leads today, but what I would like to say is it is a race. Leadership is absolutely not guaranteed. It's a global race that will shape the outcome of national security and economic prosperity for many decades to come.
The U.S. Senate Commerce Committee, chaired by Republican Senator Ted Cruz, is looking to cut regulatory barriers to U.S. artificial intelligence. This follows after China's DeepSeek shocked the world with a high-quality, affordable AI model last year, and Huawei unveiling an advanced AI chip. U.S. tech firms are now lobbying the Trump administration to ease export restrictions on AI chips, arguing that promoting AI aligned with democratic values is a national priority.
Russia marks the 80th anniversary of its victory over Nazi Germany with a grand military parade attended by world leaders, including China's President Xi Jinping. Xi has hailed the unshakable friendship between Russia and China earlier, reaffirming their comprehensive partnership during the state visit.
A contingent of Chinese troops representing the country's armed forces also took part in Friday's parade. Xi is on his 11th visit to Russia since becoming president, while Putin also announced plans to visit China this autumn for the commemoration of Japan's defeat in World War II. Ahead of the parade, both leaders signed a joint statement to deepen their comprehensive partnership, standing firm against unilateralism and hegemonic bullying, an implied reference to the US. China is locked in an escalating trade war with the US, while Russia faces mounting pressure from the US to enter peace talks over Ukraine. A unilateral three-day ceasefire was announced by Russia to coincide with the anniversary event, which Ukraine has rejected as a theatrical show.
The United States has imposed sanctions on a third independent Chinese oil refinery, commonly known as Teapot Refinery, along with several port terminal operators in China. The move comes in response to their purchase of Iranian oil ahead of an expected US-Iran nuclear talks happening this weekend in Oman's capital.
This is the latest Chinese teapot refinery targeted by the Trump administration under its reimposed maximum pressure policy. This policy aims to cut off Iran's export revenue in order to pressure Tehran into a deal to curb its nuclear program and stop the funding of militant groups across the Middle East. The company sanctioned is Hebei Xinhai Chemical Group Refinery and 3 other companies for operating a terminal at Dongying Port in Shandong Province. Officials said they had purchased or facilitated the delivery of hundreds of millions of dollars worth of Iranian oil. Previous sanctions on Chinese refiners have reportedly created difficulties in receiving oil, leading them to halt purchases of crude oil and sell product under other names. China's embassy in Washington has strongly opposed the U.S. abuse of unilateral sanctions and long-arm jurisdiction, urging the U.S. to stop interfering with and undermining normal economic and trade relations between China and Iran.
Cardinal Robert Prevost, a longtime missionary in Latin America, was elected as the surprise choice to be the new leader of the Catholic Church. Thus, he became the first U.S. Pope and taking the name Leo XIV.
Pope Leo appeared on the central balcony of St. Peter's Basilica after white smoke billowed from a chimney atop the Sistine Chapel, signifying the 133 cardinal electors had chosen him as a successor to Francis, who died last month. "Peace be with you all," he told the cheering crowd, speaking in fluent Italian. 69-year-old Prevost, originally from Chicago, has spent most of his career as a missionary in Peru and has dual Peruvian nationality. In a statement provided by the Midwest Augustinians, he was described as a man of deep integrity, a true listener, and a companion to those on the margins of society.
That report wraps up AWANI International. Stay tuned for our reports on the rivalries, strategies, and the shifts behind the power affairs driving the new global order. Visit international.astroawani.com for more and be sure to follow our social media accounts, Power Affairs. That is all for now. I'm Farhana Sheikh. Thank you and good night.